Breaking from Brussels, Canada joins Europe's defence corps for 10 million euros. The United Kingdom walks away from a 6 billion demand.
Here is the lesson. Prestige no longer buys influence. Canada advanced by being reliable, while the United Kingdom misread what Europe truly values.
Breaking tonight from Brussels, the negotiation nobody saw coming just became official. Canada, yes, Canada, has secured entry into Europe's most exclusive defence club, while Britain, with centuries of European entanglement and military prestige, walked away from the table. If you think you understand how global alliances work, what happened this week will force you to reconsider everything. The numbers tell a story that financial analysts are still struggling to process. The European Union that asked the United Kingdom to pay between 4 and 6 billion euros just for the privilege of joining their new Security Action for Europe program. Britain walked away. Canada was asked to pay 10 million euros. And negotiations concluded successfully within days. That's not a typo. The UK was quoted a fee 400 times larger than Canada's, and when faced with those terms, only one country said yes. The question isn't just why Europe and Canada reached agreement. The question is what Britain failed to understand about the new rules of power. This is the SAFE Agreement, the most ambitious defense procurement initiative Europe has launched in a generation. $245 billion allocated to rearm the continent, reduce dependency on American defense technology, and build a security architecture that can withstand whatever chaos the next decade brings. And when Europe opened negotiations for partners, they could trust partners who wouldn't use defense contracts as political leverage, partners who understood that reliability beats rhetoric every single time. Britain couldn't agree on terms. Canada did. And Mark Carney's strategic framework, the one that's been quietly reshaping Canada's position in the world, just delivered exactly what it promised. Let me show you what just happened, because the details reveal everything about where global power is actually shifting. Defense Minister David McGuinty stood in Parliament Hill Monday and announced the deal was finalized. When reporters asked about the price tag, he smiled and said, "We'll have more to say about that in due course." Translation: "We negotiated terms that work for us, and we're not interested in your speculation about what we should have paid." 24 hours later, EU spokesman Thomas Regnier confirmed it in Brussels. 10 million euros. Canada will pay 2.5 million upfront as an administrative contribution, 7.5 million as an annual participation fee. And here's the part that should terrify anyone still clinging to old assumptions about how influence works. That fee is based on expected contract value. Europe calculated Canada's defense industry access at 10 million euros. They calculated Britain's at 6 billion. And when both countries saw those numbers, only one said yes. Dear viewers, between Monday's announcement and Wednesday's confirmation, something extraordinary happened in transatlantic relationships. Europe made an offer. Britain said it was too expensive. And Canada, patient and professional Canada, became the only non-EU country ever to secure full participation in Europe's defense corps. This isn't just about one procurement agreement. This is about the fundamental collapse of prestige as a negotiating tool and the rise of strategic reliability as the currency that actually matters. But here's where the story gets interesting and where critics started asking uncomfortable questions. Justin Massey, professor at Université du Québec at Montreal, pointed out something that financial analysts immediately seized on. If entry fees are calculated based on expected benefits, he wrote, then Canada's tiny fee compared to Britain's massive ask suggests we should temper our expectations about contract value. Translation: maybe Canada isn't getting the golden ticket everyone thinks. Maybe Europe is sending a message about who they actually want at the table, regardless of contract size. And maybe, just maybe, that message is worth more than any single deal. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand was in Brussels Wednesday when reporters pressed her on Massey's analysis. She didn't dodge the question, but she didn't answer it directly either. Everyone I spoke with, she said, was very excited to have Canadian companies on the same footing as European companies competing for procurement contracts here. The SAFE Agreement brings Canada into the tent in a very positive way for the domestic Canadian economy. Notice what she did there? She didn't defend the fee calculation. She didn't promise specific contract values. She emphasized positioning, access, and long-term strategic value. Because that's what this deal actually delivers. The pattern here is identical to every major move Mark Carney's economic strategy has engineered over the past year. When Trump threatens tariffs, Canada pivots to Asian markets before Washington can blink. When America demands compliance, Canada builds alternative partnerships that make compliance optional. When Europe needs reliable partners for continental defense, Canada shows up with exactly what they need: steel, aerospace technology, advanced robotics, radar systems, and most importantly, a reputation for keeping commitments even when politics get messy. Britain showed up with demands about access and complaints about cost. Only one approach concluded successfully. And what happened next should reshape how you think about Canada's position in the world. EU spokesman Regnier confirmed that Europe has a separate agreement with Ottawa, allowing Europeans to buy products directly from Canada's defense industry if at least 20% of components come from the European Union. Translation: this isn't just about Canadian companies competing for EU contracts. This is about integrated supply chains, technology sharing, and the kind of deep economic entanglement that turns temporary partnerships into permanent strategic alignment. Britain wanted a transactional relationship. Canada offered integration. Europe chose accordingly. But let's talk about what this actually means for ordinary Canadians, because billion-dollar defense contracts and geopolitical positioning can feel abstract until you connect them to real economic impact. The SAFE Agreement gives Canadian companies access to procurement opportunities worth over $1 trillion over the next decade. That's not speculative. That's the stated value of Europe's rearmament initiative, and Canada just secured guaranteed access, while every other non-EU country, including military powers like Japan, South Korea, and yes, the United Kingdom, watches from outside. Steel manufacturers in Hamilton, aerospace engineers in Montreal, robotics firms in Toronto, they're all now competing on equal footing with German, French, and Italian companies for the largest defense modernization program Europe has launched since the Cold War ended. The critics will say 10 million euros sounds cheap because Canada isn't expected to deliver much value. The realists understand that Europe structured the fee precisely to ensure Canada would say yes, because what Europe actually wants isn't maximum contract value from Ottawa. What Europe wants is a reliable partner outside American control, a country that won't use defense deals as political leverage, a supplier who understands that showing up consistently beats showing up dramatically. And on that measure, Canada just proved it understands the assignment better than any other country on Earth. Foreign Minister Anand's comments from Brussels Wednesday revealed something else that matters here. She emphasized that European officials were excited, genuinely excited about Canadian defense technology and industrial capacity. That's not diplomatic courtesy. That's recognition of something Canadian leaders have been building quietly for years, while critics complained about military spending and questioned whether Canada still mattered on the world stage. Our defense industry isn't the largest, but in specific high-value areas, drones, advanced materials, radar and surveillance systems, next-generation armored vehicles, Canadian technology leads the world. Europe knows this. America knows this. And now, with the SAFE Agreement finalized, every other country trying to break into European defense markets knows this too. But here's the part that should make you pause and consider what's actually shifting beneath our feet. This deal isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a broader pattern where Mark Carney's strategic vision, the one that positions Canada as the reliable partner when chaos makes reliability valuable, keeps delivering results that seemed impossible just months ago. When Trump launched his tariff war, analysts predicted Canadian economic collapse. Instead, Canada signed trade agreements with Asian partners that reduced American dependency. When Trump demanded Canada fall in line on China policy, experts assumed Ottawa would comply. Instead, Canada maintained independent relationships that serve Canadian interests. And now, when Europe needed a defense partner outside American control, the country they invited wasn't Britain, wasn't Japan, wasn't any of the obvious choices. It was Canada. The UK's rejection tells you everything you need to know about how power is being recalculated in real time. Britain assumed its historical relationship with Europe, its military capabilities, its intelligence networks, its Five Eyes membership would make it indispensable. Europe looked at that assumption and said, here's your invoice, 6 billion euros. Britain assumed Europe was bluffing. Europe wasn't bluffing. And now Britain is on the outside watching Canada, polite, middleweight, supposedly unimportant Canada, walk through doors that London assumed belonged to them by right. That's not just a diplomatic setback for Britain. That's a fundamental misreading of what matters in the emerging global order. Thomas Regnier's explanation on of the fee structure reveals the EU's actual priorities with perfect clarity. The cost, he said, is based on potential contracts that third country industries will receive, and there's a correction mechanism that reassesses fees based on actual contract values over time. Translation: Europe isn't trying to maximize upfront revenue from the partner countries. Europe is trying to identify partners who will say yes to reasonable terms and then deliver consistent value over decades. Canada's €10 million fee isn't a discount. It's Europe's calculated assessment of what it takes to bring Canada inside, and it's Europe's bet that Canada will prove more valuable over time than any country demanding special status before proving anything at all. Global Affairs Canada confirmed Wednesday that technical discussions continue to finalize treaty text, but an agreement in principle has been reached. That phrasing matters. The hard part, getting Europe to say yes to Canadian participation, is done. The details, legal language, implementation timelines, specific procurement procedures, those are just mechanics. The strategic victory is already secured, and that victory delivers something that goes far beyond defense contracts. It delivers positioning. It establishes Canada as Europe's preferred partner outside EU structures. It creates frameworks that can expand into other sectors: energy, technology, infrastructure, anywhere Europe wants reliable alternatives to American or Chinese dominance. If you're watching this from Canada and you're wondering whether this matters to you personally, whether defense procurement agreements in Brussels have any connection to your life, let me make it concrete. Every $1 billion in defense contracts Canada secures through SAFE creates thousands of high-skilled jobs, engineers, technicians, project managers, roles that pay well and build expertise that extends far beyond military applications. Every Canadian company that wins European procurement bids gains credibility that opens doors in other markets. Every successful delivery strengthens Canada's reputation as a country that keeps commitments, which makes future negotiations easier across every sector. The SAFE agreement isn't just about what Canada sells to Europe, it's about how the world perceives Canada's capability and reliability. And on that measure, what happened this week changes everything. The United Kingdom will recover from this setback. Britain has resources, relationships, and resilience that ensure it remains significant on the global stage. But what Britain can't recover is the assumption that historical prestige automatically translates to contemporary relevance. Europe just sent that message with surgical precision. When you demand special treatment before proving special value, when you assume terms will bend because they always have before, when you miscalculate what the other side actually needs, negotiations collapse at €6 billion, while your competitor closes at $10 million. Canada understood what Europe needed: reliability, professionalism, a partner who wouldn't use defense deals as political theater. And when both sides calculated the value of that approach, yes became the only rational answer. So what happens next? Canada's defense industry prepares for the largest expansion it's seen in decades. European officials start identifying specific procurement opportunities where Canadian technology solves their problems. Mark Carney's strategic framework, the one that's been positioning Canada as the stable alternative when chaos makes stability valuable, continues proving that middleweight countries who play smart can outmaneuver heavyweights who play arrogant. And Britain, while still able to participate under standard third country terms with 35% contract limits, learns an expensive lesson about what preferential access actually requires when yesterday's assumptions meet today's reality. This is the new map, dear viewers. The countries who understand it early will thrive. The countries who keep fighting the old battles will keep losing in ways they never saw coming. Canada just proved which side of that divide it's chosen. And Europe's response, €10 million, full access, welcome to the table, tells you everything you need to know about who's actually winning. If this kind of strategic clarity matters to you, if you want to understand how Canada is reshaping its position while others cling to assumptions that no longer work, subscribe to this channel. We're tracking every move, every deal, every moment, where the future reveals itself to anyone paying attention. This is Canada Next, and what happens next depends entirely on whether you're watching closely enough to see it coming. Look, everything I've shown you tonight comes from public data and official reporting, but the conclusions, those are mine. You decide what it means.